that politicians, MPs, are going to receive a £6,000 pay hike next year, which will take their salaries to £92,700.
Yes, this comes after a series of public sector wage hikes, which will see MPs getting a bigger pay rise than nurses and ambulance workers.
Well, joining us now is Tory MP for Buckingham, Greg Smith. Greg, morning.
Morning.
Whether you like it or not, whether it's been proposed by an independent pay review body, IPSA, the public ain't going to like this. You're getting a bigger pay rise than nurses, and you're paid probably 3 times what the average nurse is paid already.
I'm not going to pretend that it's a helpful thing right now, that there's this suggestion that that's what MPs' pay is going to be increased by. I'm not sure that we should get an increase that's bigger than the public sector at large, but it's out of our hands. It's a system that we've got where MPs don't even vote on our own pay anymore. It is an it is an independent body that puts this forward, and it's not a final package yet. So there is a chance that IPSA, when that's the independent body that pays us, looks at this in the new year, they may well move it down.
Currently, inflation is at 4.7%. If, as we believe the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, by April, when this rise will kick in, inflation will be closer to 2%. So you'll be having a pay rise of more than 3 times the rate of inflation.
If that is what IPSA put forward in the new year. At the moment, and I appreciate that they've gone with the October figure the last few years, so yes, it's likely that that's what will come forward based on past pay terms. But this is not final, and IPSA, a body that is out of our hands. It's not something MPs can vote on or change or increase or decrease. IPSA may well come to a different conclusion in the new year based on the facts that you've just outlined.
Will you be accepting this pay rise?
If that's what the pay rise is, yes, I will. But it's not in my hands to determine what I am paid. It has been given to an independent body who have done it now for several years. And if that's what MPs are paid, then that's what, yes, will come into my bank account.
Does the system need to change then? Because, I mean, as you say, IPSA takes the October data. That's what they've been doing the past few years. That's why it currently sits at 7.1%. But as Andrew was saying, we could see inflation back down to 2% by April. Does that then need to change? Do we even need IPSA at all? We've had an email in from Peter who says, why do we have an independent body when you could simply have someone Google the average pay rise of public sector workers and go off that? This is typical government waste.
Look, IPSA has not been without its frustrations, but after what happened in the noughties, well before I was a Member of Parliament, there clearly needed to be a change to the system of the way MPs were paid, particularly in terms of the business costs for employing staff and buying equipment and things like that, because in the noughties and before that, MPs clearly abused that, and it needed to change. Do we need a different system that determines what pay should be across the whole public sector? Yes, probably, because at the moment we're in a position where everyone is negotiating for themselves, with the exception of MPs. And instead of having a more uniform pay increase that matches whatever the inflation numbers are, different numbers are being offered to nurses as distinct doctors, as distinct railway workers, as distinct firefighters, police, etc. I could go on, and it's probably time to have a look at whether there is a more uniform way we could do that.
Greg, of course, will say, I'm not taking the increase. But, of course, it doesn't matter to him because he's worth, via his wife's money, nearly £800 million. But that will make you lot look not quite so good.
Well, look, I don't criticise anyone for having become wealthy earlier in their careers. Good luck to them. That's, what we want everybody to be as prosperous as they can be. But there is a question about who can enter politics. I wasn't independently wealthy before I was elected in 2019. I don't have much to fall back on. If I lost my seat, I'd have to get another job very, very quickly in order to pay the bills. I accept there are others that aren't in that position. But we do have to have this debate around whether politics is accessible from people from any walk of life to actually come in and offer their best to serve their country, to serve their constituents. And if the pay isn't at a point that is attractive to a lot of people, then it's not going to work. For me, I'm fine with it. I'm absolutely happy with the salary I get. But there are people out there that just won't do it.
Can we talk to you about one of your colleagues who's done very well financially out of the last few years in Parliament? That's Baroness Mone, Greg. £60 million profit. Her husband has banked in the Isle of Man Trust. Very nice, offshore, of course. She reluctantly admits she's a beneficiary, but probably only a beneficiary if her husband dies and her children benefit too. I mean, what a complete political disaster she is. Can she ever set foot in the House of Lords again? Should she be kicked out immediately?
I agree with you. It is a total mess. I've never actually met her, but clearly she has dominated the headlines for a long time. It's not a good look. Whether she'll ever enter the House of Lords again it's probably more of a matter for her as to whether she could face it. But yeah, I don't think she'd have a lot of legitimacy trying to contribute to a debate in there again.
She's a liar, isn't she? That's the problem.
Look, I'm not going to start banding around things like that, but clearly...
Well, she did admit that she lied to the press, but she said that's not a crime.
Andrew, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right on that. Clearly, disaster zone over the last couple of years as she's dominated the headlines. I don't think she'd have legitimacy trying to contribute to a debate in the House of Lords or ask questions or whatever it might be again. So I would politely suggest via the medium of GB News that she might want to consider whether she returns to the House of Lords.
No, but she's admitted to making £60 million in profit from PPE that couldn't even be used. It wasn't even fit for purpose. And the Lib Dems now calling for an urgent, independent inquiry into what happened at the Cabinet Office over these contracts. Is that something that you'd support?
I think we do need to understand what happened, but we need to understand what happened through the context of a world in abject panic and crisis, trying to get PPE to the front line, where there were limited supplies of it. And I think probably some of the usual checks and balances that would normally go with public sector procurement fell to the wayside just in that desperation, that panic, to try and get PPE not just into our own country, but into governments all around the world, trying to do it for their own health services and social care sectors and everybody else. So I think we do have to view it through the lens of just how urgent the situation was. But that's not to excuse the fact that billions of pounds worth of unusable PPE was procured. And we need to, let's hope that we don't have another pandemic. Let's hope we don't find ourselves in that situation again. However, clearly lessons have got to be learned so that we can be better prepared should that hit us again.
And should criminal charges be brought against companies who profited in the wake of the pandemic, and especially with products that weren't fit for purpose?
I think if it can be proven that people were deliberately supplying equipment that was not up to the job, that was not fit for purpose, that was not actually going to work or help anybody, then yes, that is outright fraud. And of course, those companies should be prosecuted. I fear that the burden of proof would be very difficult in that, and maybe some people were buying stuff that they, in good faith, thought was right and turned out not to be. But if it's proven that people were just simply providing duff stuff, then yes, of course they need to be held to account and brought to justice for that.
All right, that's Greg Smith. He's the Conservative MP for Buckingham. Thanks for joining us.